You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and man, just like any other time, we have a special guest. Today, we have a true honor talking to Momoko Uno. She is going to tell us all about her amazing story and also her journey. She moved to the U.S. in 1997 and after graduating from medical school with training in internal medicine, pharmaceuticals, and botanical medicine. She is on a mission, and man, she loves humor, so we're already best friends. And she is author of 2 books. You can go check out her website, and I'm telling you, it's something that you don't want to miss. Her website is mokowrites.com. Without further ado, I want to welcome her to the show. Say, how you doing?
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's lovely to meet you.
I appreciate your time being on. So today, I figured we will talk about the topic of self-acceptance and laughter are the keys to well-being. Yes. And I think that's an amazing topic because a lot of people are a little serious, and I understand life happens, but it's also okay to give our permissions to laugh. So first and foremost, kind of tell us a little bit about your career in medical and health and what inspired you to take that path.
So I started in the medical field when my first interest was probably when my mother was quite ill from a young age. And so that really inspired me to go into alternative medicine in particular, because she was very much influenced by non-traditional methods. So I was already exposed at a very young age to Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture. So when I went to medical school, I pursued a degree in integrative medicine. So that was mixing up Chinese herbs and pharmaceuticals. So I grew up in Australia, and in Australian high schools, you're recommended to start thinking about your career at a really young age. So around 14 years old, we were all talking about, what do you want to do for medical, what do you want to do when you graduate from school? And for me, seeing my mother quite ill, I think probably was the most, I wouldn't say it's inspiring, right? Because it's not inspiring to see somebody sick, but I think it was the most influential, that's the better word, influential experience that I had that made me realize that I don't like watching people suffer. And if there's anything I can do to help them, I want to help them. So that's how I got into medicine. And then, after finishing medical school, I decided that I wanted to branch out into other areas, because traditional medicine and also alternative medicine, everything's quite limited. So I could just see the limitations in my education. So I just kept going into all sorts of different directions, trying to find different healing modalities that would work for more people.
And with that, having the experience to be able to interact with people of all backgrounds, shapes and sizes, learning from their personal journey themselves and their health world, what was some of the things that you learned from the people you served?
I think what I've learned is that nobody's a cookie cutter and everybody requires individualized care. So what works very well for one person might have the opposite reaction for another. So often these protocols that, you might hear about, for granted, like for many people, maybe like half or even 80% of people it might work for, but then you're left with at least 20% of the people that it doesn't work. And so I have a very large practice of patients who have come to see me because they don't fit into the majority and are seeking different ways. For whatever reason, pharmaceuticals didn't work for them, or even alternative medicine didn't work for them, and they're looking for different avenues. So what I've learned is that when somebody says that something's not working for them, it's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because we're not approaching it correctly for that person. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And you being that professional world, having exposure to that, I mean, one would think, man, why isn't this a topic that is heard a lot? I mean, I wouldn't say people are not talking about it, because people are definitely talking about holistic health and, customized health. But it seems like it's not always dominant. We look at news cycles, and I mean, you just pick your buffet line. It's both good and positive, and also negative cycles that we are seeing throughout the day. You as a professional, though, what are some things you try to break down for the patients as far as like, here are your options, and here's a strategy that we can take to, maybe find a better way than what you have currently?
Absolutely. So I'll just use one specific example. But for example, if somebody comes to me and they need some supplement or medication or something, what one person might need in terms of volume, like the dosage, might differ greatly from another person. And it's mostly to do with sensitivity levels. Like, it's not to do with your height and your weight so much, but to do with your metabolism. And that's actually quite difficult to know ahead of time. And a lot of it is trial and error. So if somebody says to me, I'm extremely sensitive to medication, I take one Tylenol and it knocks me out, even if that makes sense, then I'm going to be very, very cautious in terms of how much I give that person any kind of supplement or medication. And other people I wouldn't be as cautious with. So just in terms of understanding somebody's sensitivity and how they metabolize not just medication, but food in general, how sensitive they are to the environment will greatly alter how I approach their treatment.
What you do, especially anybody in the health industry, because what you do and what everyone does in that industry, it could be stressful, not just for the person you're caring for, but what you do. What you're doing is very important. It's important to the community. How do you handle stress? Because I know in your bio, it mentions you have a little humor side of you, but how do you manage stress day to day, knowing how important it is what you're doing?
So I diffuse stress by doing things that bring me joy. So this is something that I also recommend to all my patients, to make sure that you're doing things that make you happy. Like for me, I've always liked to dance. So I'll take dance classes, and I like to write as well. That gives me a tremendous amount of joy. So I try to put as much joy into my life. And then I also try to laugh as much as possible, because I think that really helps to balance stress out. And then exercising too, right? That's a huge release for stress. And I also have a very, very little meditation practice. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. But that seems to calibrate me very well. So there's lots of different things, but I try to make sure that I get these little nuggets of joy throughout my day, and then also ways to release stress every single day in small amounts and then bigger chunks. Like, a little thing that I might want to do is, if I'm having a rough day, is I watch some videos. Like, I just like watching cat videos. I just think they're really funny. So I'll, if I'm having a bad day, I'll just watch a video for, 30 seconds or a minute or something like that, or bloopers or something. So I think bloopers are really funny. So I'll watch those, and I'll just try to break up my day strategically to make sure that my brain gets something else to think about. Does that make sense? Yeah, and I have to stop right here, and I have to comment on the cat video watching, because one, I personally, please don't dislike me, guys, but I personally do not favor cats. I'll just put it that way. Like cats. But I love watching me some cat videos on TikTok, because, man, they are not just smart, but they are hilarious, especially the reactions and all that good stuff. So I'm glad you pointed it out. So fun fact, if y'all want to have some good laughs, watch some funny cats on TikTok. But this episode topic is going to dive into also everything's tying up together nicely. Self-acceptance and laughter are keys to well-being. We kind of touch on how you use humor and just
making things not as serious, because it's so easy to be weighed down with life drama and issues and what have you. But let's talk about self-acceptance, because I'm sure that's something you probably discuss with your patients every now and then when the time is right. But how do you think societal expectations and cultural norms can impact our ability to practice a thing like self-acceptance?
Self-acceptance, I actually think, is quite difficult, because society tells us that we should be a certain size, we should look a certain way, we should make a certain amount of money, you have to be a certain age. Like, there are all these very specific criteria about being successful. And also that you shouldn't, if you're a spiritual person, you can't be angry. And if you're anxious, then you're weak. And there are all these messages that we get that I think are completely erroneous. And to be able to practice self-acceptance and understand that we are feeling a certain way because of something that's happening in our lives, and just to be able to say stuff, okay, I'm just anxious right now, or wow, I'm irritable, I'm really angry, and not to judge yourself for these emotional reactions, because as soon as you start to judge yourself, you've boxed yourself in, and it actually adds fuel to that emotion. Then on the other hand, you just say to yourself, I'm just feeling these things. They tend to cycle out much more quickly, and you can neutralize that experience and recover into a state of equanimity much more quickly if you go into self-acceptance.
We're talking to our guest today, Momoko Uno. You go to her website, momokowrites.com. We are talking about the discussion for today's self-acceptance and laughter are keys to well-being. I want to go back to your mom for a second. I remember you mentioned that seeing her sick, it had an impact on your life. And obviously that is something that happened. But having the ability to say, you know what, I want to do something about, health, and you choosing the path you chose, understanding what you saw your mother go through, what's some of the things that you learned from her growing up? Because I believe that a lot of things that we do now and today was influenced definitely when we were younger.
Absolutely. I think that, one of the things as an adult, I would say, looking back, that I have learned, not necessarily I learned when I was a child, but looking back that, when you have a sick parent, I can only really speak for myself, right? But there's often a sense of neglect. And especially because I was very young when my mum was sick, I think that she started being ill when I was probably around 3 months old. So there was a sense of abandonment and neglect that happened to me. And I had to work through all of that and learn how to not take that personally, and realize that she wasn't there for me, not because she didn't care about me, but because she was unable to, because she was sick. And I think this is actually quite common when you have parents that go through illness, some kind of illness, or they're having some emotional challenges, or, there's life. Life is really stressful, right? And you can't be 100% available to your kids all the time. And I think that especially when you're young, like under 10 years old, most children tend to take things very, very personally. We go through this developmental phase that's, where you're considered egocentric, meaning that you believe that everything happens to you because you've created it, basically. So if you've had a traumatic experience before you were 10, you often believe that that's because you've done something wrong. So having had my own experience with that and working through that, I've discovered that it is extremely common that people have this experience from childhood, that something happened. In my case, it was extreme because my mum was sick for such a long period of time. But there are other people who've gone through a shorter period, but still, even if it's a relatively short period, when it wasn't well explained to the child, you can have quite extreme abandonment issues that develop, and that can really affect your self-esteem and relationships later on in life.
And with that, learning about that, when it comes to relationships, you today, what were some of the things that you kind of put in place for yourself to say, you know what, this is how I'm going to strategically have these great relationships? How did you kind of work that to work for you and the people that you care about?
Yes. So to not take other people's behaviors personally, I think that's the crux of being a self-sufficient, independent thinking person and an emotionally stable person too, is to realize that people behave because of something that's going on with them, and it's not really has nothing really to do with you. And I think that once you start to be able to see that people are having their own challenges, and sometimes those challenges are really big, and then to realize that that really is their own experience and you're having your own experience, and you can just step aside from that and be in a much more neutral place and be able to hold space for them and also for yourself too. I think life just gets much easier when you're not thinking about, oh my God, did I do something that might have triggered that person's behavior? Or are they treating me this way because I did something bad or wrong? If you just realize, oh my God, that person's having a bad day, it's just so much easier on you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can't point where I heard it before, but paraphrasing, I believe I heard someone kind of speak on this topic that is, there are times where we literally can overthink on a lot of things and we make up stories in our head and it isn't actually happening. It's just how we are actually thinking about it. If you could, for the audience, kind of touch on that, because that can probably be a common issue that a lot of people face.
Oh, absolutely. And the challenging thing is, so if you're in a relationship, or even, it doesn't have to be a relationship with anybody, like anybody that you're relating with, if that person is not very articulate about what they're going through, then you have to basically make up your mind and make up assumptions about why that person's behaving that way. So you're kind of left in the dark to figure it out for yourself. Now, if this other person that's in your life, it's a partner, a friend, or any family member or anything, if they're able to say, hey, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, don't take my behavior personally, then you're like, oh, all right. Well, thank you for letting me know. But if that person, and most people are not great communicators, if they're having a rough time, most people will shut down, not say anything, will just be, they'll have emotional outbursts or something, and it's very difficult to really see where you start and where you end. And then you get kind of caught up in the same situation. Then you start resonating with the same kind of level of emotions, and then you start ping-ponging back those emotions back and forth, kind of like a hot potato. So the best thing that you can do if you're going through something that's challenging is to let somebody know, hey, I'm going through something and please don't take it personally. And if you can get somebody else, the people around you, to open up and let them know what they're going through, it's such a relief knowing that what they're going through has nothing to do with you.
Once again.
And if it is if it is something to do with you, then it's good to talk about it. Like if you're doing something that might be upsetting this other person, then it's good to talk about it, and if there's any kind of misunderstanding, to clear it up. But often honest conversations don't happen very often.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocused Radio, talking to our guest, Momoko Uno. You can go to her website, momokowrites.com. And I want to talk about trauma, because trauma is something that people face in their own story, their own situation. But how in ways can people, obviously, if you need professional help, go seek that. But how can people find a path forward to heal from those traumas and find better connecting and healing process?
So I think one of the best things for trauma is learning how to slow down your breathing, because when we've gone through a traumatic experience, what tends to happen is that our breathing becomes shallow. And when we're triggered, we're in fight or flight, and the breathing becomes shallow and fast. So if you can continuously remind yourself to breathe deeply and slowly, it is going to signal to your brain that everything is okay. And then you'll be able to see that what is going on now is not a repetition of what's happened in the past, because trauma is about recreating the bad thing that has happened and seeing that in the future. But if you can stay calm as much as possible through deep breathing, because that signals to the brain everything's okay, then you're going to be miles ahead of your healing process. So that's the first thing that I tell people, is just to focus on breathing.
Someone listening right now and say they are seeking professional help and they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with. Everyone's story is unique, obviously, but with that set aside, what are some ways, especially your own experience being in the health industry, what are some ways a person can say, you know what, here's a time when I can be seeking professional help, but then here's another area in my life where I can actually be self-efficient in how I tackle my own way of how I, go through life as far as building good systems and boundaries?
So I think talking through it with friends and family, anybody who is kind, who has a compassionate ear, the more you tell your story and open up to people and allow yourself to feel cared for, the better off you're going to be. So I recommend surrounding yourself with good people. That always helps a lot. Making sure that you get enough rest, because often traumatic experiences will rob people of sleep, because you're going to be up at night trying to process it. If you can't process it all throughout the day, then it's going to bleed over, spill over into your night too. So getting enough rest is very, very important, but it becomes also challenging because your nervous system is so ramped up. And the other thing that's relatively easy to do is working on your diet, making sure that you're not eating things that are going to overly stimulate you, like reducing caffeine and reducing sugar, refined carbohydrates, because those tend to be stimulating on the nervous system, because you want to eat things that tend to calm you down.
And going back to today's topic, when it comes to self-acceptance and laughter, what final question would be when it comes to looking at, culture and societal divides, what do you think individuals by themselves, right? Not trying to blanket everybody in the masses, but what can we do responsibly individually in how we use self-acceptance and laughter to kind of bridge the gap between different cultures and societal divides?
Well, that's a really good question. I think to understand that on a human level, on an emotional level, I don't think that there is much difference from person to person. On the inside, we all have the same things going on, emotionally speaking, physically speaking. And to understand that doesn't matter what kind of culture that you come from, we are more similar than we are different.
I love the answer. And you being in the industry of health, where you said earlier how you, on your early part of your journey, you seeking ways to help, and healing is something that is a process. I mean, it's not something that, turn on the microwave in 15 seconds, everything is perfect afterwards. There's going to be setbacks, and you take 3 steps forward and it feels like you took 10 steps back. What are ways that you've been able to see patients that you treated and helped, see ways that they were able to bounce back from times where it feels like, man, I'm just having a bad day?
Well, first of all, to recognize that, as you said, that this is not going to be an overnight thing, and that healing really is a lifelong process, and to see it as a journey rather than a step. It really is something that takes a long time. And to be able to celebrate the small steps, because the more positive regard that you can have for yourself and say to yourself, oh, wow, look, I took a step in the right direction, and just really celebrate that and steep in that positivity, I think is really important. And to pat yourself on the back, but to also recognize that it is completely natural and normal to walk backwards. It's just part of the process. But there are times when when people, everybody, me included, where we feel like we're digging a hole and we're just in the hole and we can't get out of it. And that's very, very hard. And to make sure that, again, you're surrounded by the right people that will be able to shine the light for you so that they can help you through this dark tunnel, I think is extremely important.
We've been talking to Momoko Uno. Go to her website, MomokoWrites.com. If you want to learn more about her personal experience or some sunshine, she has books that you can check out. First one on her personal experience is 14 Days. You can get that on her website. And also for sunshine, you can get her other book, Bringing Sunshine Back to My Mind, a story about overcoming trauma and finding wholeness. If you had one message, sum up everything that we talked about today, what would you say to listeners out there? What can they start after this podcast and begin the journey of healing?
Well, it's never too late. And tomorrow is a new day, and it is never impossible. There is always hope.
Like I always want to say to you, Momoko, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.